Hello, guys, and welcome. My name is Matt Muldoon, and this is the Obsessed with God podcast. My guest on the podcast today is a very dear friend of mine that I grew up with. His name is Nick Johnstone. I've been waiting to have this conversation with Nick on this for a while now, and we finally sat down and we did it. And Nick is one of the only people that I could see growing up that sort of mirrored my chase of spirituality. He mirrored my chase of wanting more, of understanding that there was something more, and of not knowing how to do it. And we both sort of made the same kind of mistakes, and we had more or less the same path to get where we are. And it's wonderful to check in with him and hear how he's doing now. And yeah, it was a great conversation. I value this man's opinion quite a lot, actually, and he speaks about some of his trials and tribulations, his path to God, how he found God, what God means to him. And he speaks about his life now and how he is trying to impact the lives of others with, he is a strengths coach. I won't try and explain it because I will screw it up, but he speaks about it in depth on this episode, and it's quite interesting. And he leaves his contact for how you can get a hold of him if that interests you. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here is my friend, Nick Johnstone. Enjoy. We as seekers are all searching for that divine experience with our God. Listen in as we discuss different people's stories and perspectives about God from their walk of life and from their part of the world. My name is Matt Muldoon, and this is the Obsessed with God podcast. We're live, Nick. We finally did this. We finally sat down to do one of these. How are you?
I'm well, my friend. We've been, I want to say, conversing for some time, and I'm excited to not only spark up an old friendship as we've been doing, but to kind of catch up and share journeys, so to speak.
Sure.
And I'm excited just to see where this goes.
I would say, as I said in the introduction, Nick he's one of my oldest friends, and he's one of those friends I have that I won't speak to him for years and years and years and years, and then I talk to him again, and we talk for hours and hours and hours and hours about like all of the substance of life, and then I won't speak to him forever. Like we very much like go off our own path, and then they converge for a couple of minutes every couple of years, and we wave and go off. So it's nice to finally sit down and do this. So maybe Nick, who are you and where do you live right now?
As I was mentally preparing for today or for this conversation and all of the questions that I may be asked, because I've done this a few times where I'm like, sometimes you get the questions beforehand, sometimes you don't, and sometimes it's like, I didn't expect that coming. The first one, I was like, he's going to say, so what do you do? And who are you? And my first response to that is, I am a constant work in progress. I can tell you who I'm not, but to tell you who I am is going to change 2 weeks from now. Mm-hmm. Because everything I have learned, and I'll get back to actually who I am because I think that's an important question to begin with. But what I've learned is I have tried to live up to other people's expectations for 36 years of my life. And it wasn't until I tried to commit suicide that I realized that the key to mental health is understanding what authenticity means. Mm-hmm. And it has been a journey since then. But what I've learned is if I do not live in the moment, Nick is not okay.
Oh, for real, man. You're very fortunate that you learned that lesson. Nobody learns those lessons. Everyone thinks that I just had this conversation earlier today. Like everyone thinks that when you're not okay, it all gets subsidized with all the shit, right? It gets subsidized with booze, it gets subsidized with sex, it gets subsidized with products, it's subsidized with all that shit. And it takes so long to just strip it away and be like, I got to be right in my head with whatever that is. It's so weird that that's weird to people. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's very weird. And during this journey of well, I don't even have a term for it yet. During my walk of life, we'll call it, out of that stage, I found a few things that have worked really well for me. One of those being strengths, and understanding strengths and weaknesses from a personal assessment through Gallup company. I've done it as well. I'm also a coach for parents as well, with a different strengths assessment, and have kind of built this practice, post COVID to kind of help people along the same journey that I went through in understanding and that self-acceptance of peel back the layers of the bullshit, and completely understand who you are. So I live on 11 acres in outside of Markdale, Ontario, which is halfway between Toronto and the middle of nowhere. And if you're familiar with Chapman's ice cream that everybody gets here in Canada, it's about 5-minute drive away, and the plant is fantastic. I've been in there many times. So,
wow.
So now you know the rest of the story.
Yeah, no kidding. I had no idea. I'm excited about that Chapman's thing. My kids just had that for dessert today. Learned something new today.
Deadly.
So before I think, Nick, we unpack what you said at the beginning there. Actually, maybe let's just start there. Let's go right to rock bottom. How and when did you find yourself at rock bottom? Let's just start with that. There's a bunch more questions on that, but how and where did you find yourself at rock bottom? It must have been.
It was absolute rock bottom. Yeah. There are times since then where I feel like I've come close to that, but it's been nowhere to that stage. My rock bottom. So to tell you a brief story. So I've got 3 children, ages 7, 5, and our youngest is now 1 year old. We bought our property in 2019, May of 2019. And we left, the prototypical, stereotypical Canadian/American dream, big driveway, big house, big backyard, all the neighbors, great community, lots of kids around. And my wife and I kind of looked at each other one day and went, this doesn't feel right. And we bought 11 acres of bush with a tiny house, an old hunt cabin that needed to be retrofitted and renovated so that we could live in it 4 seasons. When I say tiny cabin, we've got 2 bedrooms and it's 570 square feet, and it was 2 season at best. There was, a gap, a 12-inch gap around the whole house that was completely rotted and see-through through the side of the house. And we needed water and hydro. And I spent 2 months, 16, 18 hours a day from August till November 1st, preparing the house to live in for the winter with a pregnant wife at the time and 2 young girls. We spent 6 months in our trailer on the property, and we enjoyed every minute of it. But those 2 months, guess where I was? I didn't have anybody to talk to. I was by myself for 2 months, preparing my family to live in this house that I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. The sign in front of our property said this house was built by YouTube, because I was like, I don't know. I YouTubed everything. And anyway, so at the end of it, to kind of cut this a little bit shorter, I guess, because I have a tendency of being long-winded. At the end of it all, got in the house, and for 9 straight days, I didn't get out of bed.
Oh,
And my wife was like, "Something's going on," and I'm like, "No, I'm good. I'm exhausted from spending all this time getting the house ready." And day 10 happened. I can remember it like it was yesterday, because day 9 I had written my exit strategy, so to speak, and what was going to happen. I had the note all planned out, and the morning went off without a hitch, and drove into Owen Sound, which is the nearest city to us, about 40 minutes, and sat at the edge of the bay. And my next plan was to call a friend that never picked up the phone and say, "Hey, I need you to call my wife and let her know that I'm no longer here." And the fucker answered the phone.
oh,
And screwed my whole plan up. So, from that moment on, the one thing he said to me is, "We will not be talking if you don't go get help." And at that stage, he was the only confidant that I had ever spoke to, and I had this instant connection that I can't let this go. From that moment on, called Canadian Mental Health, booked an appointment, and about 3 months of hard work and learning how to ground myself and learn some of the techniques that there are out there. But that was the deepest of the deep. I had the car in drive, ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
I was just waiting to finish up the phone call, and he answered the phone instead.
Oh, dude. It's those, when I hear those stories, like, I don't know. I suppose I don't hear them the same way other people do. Cause like I never tried to kill myself, but I wanted to die for a long time, if that makes sense. Like I lived in, well, you know how I lived. I lived in harm's way, right? So like it was, it was too much to think something through. So it was like, well, you could just live fast and out of control. And so that's just what I chose to do instead. And it's such a strange rationalization, right? Because you're in the moment, like for some reason this makes sense to you, and it's the hardest thing to explain to people who don't get it. Because like when people speak about, and it's happening less and less, right? But when people speak about mental health being a weakness or being something that you could just like brush off, the point is that they don't know the depths of it. Like you're speaking to a person who's telling you that the sky is green, and you're like, "No, it's not, it's blue." And they're like, "No, it's not, it's green." You're like, "Whatever, here we go again." Like they literally don't understand that it's a fact that's burning through you. Like you know what it's like you're swimming in this abyss and you're just taking on water, and you're like, "Well, I could stop kicking and not take on water anymore. Like, what do I do from here?"
It's a great analogy, because I can remember what my body felt like in that moment of, it's not really weakness. It's a stage of, I've got nothing left to give.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm empty. I'm empty emotionally. I'm empty physically. I'm empty, like in every sense of the word. I've got nothing left to give. And I realized as I was going through some of the help that I was going through, it was because I was living up to everybody else's expectations of what life should be like. Mm-hmm. And here I am, bought 11 acres of property with 570 square feet, and all I could hear was everybody saying, "What the fuck are you doing?"
It's hard, man. Like it is hard to block. I mean, I've spent a lifetime, I think, blocking out those voices, but like it's hard to do. Like you swim against the stream. Any amount of time you spend swimming against the stream, it's like it's hard slugging. And like you say, like if you don't have a way to communicate with people, and all you're doing is taking on the stupidity of everyone else that you know, when you don't yet know your own boundaries, when you are allowing people to speak to you in these ways, you're listening to this negative dog shit and you just take it in and you have no way to combat it. It is fucking difficult, man. Like you're bailing, like you're 75% of your day feels like you're bailing water, and then you're like, "Well, I didn't get anything done today." So it always just feels like it's falling down on you, and like it's just, relentless. Like people don't understand how relentless those places are.
It's heavy. It's heavy. But I think for me, it was realizing, and maybe this is a male issue, but I think it's more human, that we feel like we have to have all the answers ourselves, and asking for help is less than. It's viewed as less than if I have to ask for help. And when you get involved, and what I've learned since then is when you get involved in community, when you get involved in a group of people with the same like-minded goals and beliefs, help is just, it's not only offered, but it's asked for. And it's this balance and symbiotic relationship of everybody's in this together. And it's not one person that is struggling, it's the whole group. But that was a journey. That was a long journey. And part of the reason why we moved to this property is because we're now a part of a community like that, where, you know, everybody's in this, you know, cooperative almost, where we're all like, I'm going to a farm tomorrow for 11 hours tomorrow just to go cook meals for people. Right. So, but it's community is everything. And anyways, that was kind of off on a tangent, but there we go.
No, that's not at all. I get it, but exactly what you were saying about community. Like so much help for people is found through community. Like I did a podcast with my friend Shannon, and she was talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I, as an alcoholic, I don't identify with their practices. I don't prefer them. I don't like them. I have no use for them. But it's so interesting to listen to Shannon talk about community. Like community saved her. It was not like her own efforts got her to a plateau where she could stand up again. But it's this community of people that are around her that bring her forward. Like it has nothing to do. It's not, sorry, Shannon. It's not that it has nothing to do with Shannon, but Shannon has carved out a community of people, and she relies on that to. And it isn't necessarily even the people that are in it. It's like you're saying, it's the community representation. Like it's that there is a community of like-minded people. As long as there's a community of like-minded people, she's moving forward somehow.
It's accountability. It's accountability to show up as the best version of yourself. And we take little bits of everything that everybody brings to the table and go, I'm going to use that. And I like that about that person. And we try it. And some of it works and some of it is not for us. But that's the part about being involved in community, is the fact that we get these tight, close relationships with so many people that you're like, it goes back to the old adage, you are the sum of your 5 closest friends. Right. And if you surround yourself with people that are, you know, great people, you are eventually going to become great yourself, to the point where you may surpass them, and you will need and require new friends, because there's that constant need for the next level. And that's a human trait. That's not a Matt Muldoon or a Nick Johnstone trait. That's a human quality. We're constantly searching for how can I improve? Well, we should be.
That's it. We should be, but it very rarely it happens, or very rarely it's pursued as seriously as it should be, in my opinion. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. What was I going to? I think it goes back to, you know, something that I've been saying in practice for some time is, you know, we've all heard of the 80-20 rule, right? Like you spend 80% of your time making 20% of your money, or you spend 20% of your time making 80% of your money in business, whether it's with your children and life. There's so many things in the realm of the globe that 80-20 rule comes into play. And I think what is super unique about that is we are constantly trying to teach not only our children but ourselves to follow the norm I just want to feel normal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what we should be doing is teaching people how to go for that 20% and that uniqueness and what makes them that individual person, because that's where the 80% of the results come in, is through that uniqueness and that specific talent that they bring to not only their community, but to the globe itself. Right. So anyways, it's
totally. So having said that, Nick, so we brushed into your rock bottom there. Can you tell me about the exact moment in your life that you experienced God or the universe and its divinity? You either heard it, you felt it, you saw it, you ascended to it, whatever it was that happened, but a moment in your life where you knew that it was real, or if you had that moment, but like a moment that was not a, whatever that was to you, like the moment where you were like, oh, okay. Have you had one of those moments?
had two. Post attempt, we'll call it. The first one was after being okay, after going through the journey that I've gone through, and through helping people, I decided about 2 months ago on a Friday morning that I had this 3-hour window that I was going to go for a walk along the same stretch of shore where this was going to take place back in 2019. And I did so while on the phone with a group of people that were there for me, walking me through the scenario, kind of in this community type feel. And was open, was vulnerable, shared my story, and then literally grabbed a piece of dirt and sand and scrunched it up into the ball and then threw it out into the bay, as if this was my release, kind of not only the emotional side of it, but just being able to come back to center. I've been so disassociated with my heart chakra. For those of you that understand the 7 chakras, I have seen some practitioners that have said you are so blocked in your heart chakra that your lower half doesn't connect with your upper half. And I can remember that moment of throwing that dirt and that clump of earth out into the water and falling to my knees and sobbing like a child, like everything just exploded out of my body.
Oh, wow.
I can't explain that feeling to anybody. You know, when you get goosebumps because you're like, this is a moment.
Yeah, I got it. Well, man.
When you multiply that by 10, maybe more than that, that was the emotions, that was the feeling. And I'm getting it now, just retelling this story in the moment of that happening, because that was the moment that I realized that my journey is important to everyone, and the lessons that I have learned, and whether I think that I am too much for people or not enough, my responsibility is to share my story.
So was it, did your path to that, was it more a path to like acceptance of yourself, that like, this is your walk, this is you're enough, it's okay? Like, was that more, is that a way that you would sum up your experience with the divine?
That would be, hey, listen, I call when it comes to religion, I'm a free agent. Because
that's a good way to be, man.
I know what I am not, but other than that, there's, how many different religions are there in the world? Hundreds,
thousands,
right?
Yeah, man. Like,
I'm a free agent.
Yeah, everyone.
I know what I know what I am not, because I've attempted those things, and I'm not saying that they're not great for other people, but for me, it doesn't serve me.
No.
So I'm on this journey of finding and educating and learning what's best for me. And I think everybody should do that and be curious regarding their religion.
What can you tell? You said you had two experiences. Can you talk about the second experience you had? Where you felt the divine?
The second experience I had, I've been working with, lack of a better term, a light worker. And
you're speaking to a person who speaks to those people all the time, and you're like, I hope he understands what I mean by light worker. And I'm like, yeah, and
keep going. Yeah. So had a session with her, and that was there was a lot of things that stirred up from my childhood.
Oh, weird. Just like all of us.
Weird. We're all messed up, and we're all loopy.
I never dealt with any of it then.
Thanks
for the skills.
And after the session and her, she's done thousands of, seen thousands of different people. And at the end of it, we were chatting, and she says, what I enjoy most about this today is the fact that I've seen some people that have had some messed up things in their life, but I've never met anybody that I can't find those memories from. And it happened she said, I know how old you were. I can pinpoint it. I'm not going to go into the details, but because of it's some personal stuff and I don't want to expose people, but it basically, at the end of it, she goes, this is how old you were. This is who it involved, but you've blocked it away so deeply that you don't know what it is. And about 2 weeks later, it came to me, and that same feeling came back of just completely falling to my knees and being like, it was eye-opening. And that was the second time that it's really, but again, going back to your question before, is it just coming into myself? And I think the answer to that is we've got so much baggage and so much dirt on our own, on our own souls and our own bodies, that you've got to work through it. You've got to understand what it is, and then you've got to accept it. It's no different than any other trauma that happens in anybody else's life, right? Like, trauma is, you go through the 5 stages, and if you're not willing to accept what that was and learn from the lessons, then that's what life is all about. So
what you just said is, it's the greatest line I've ever received in my life, and it was also the most irritating. The first time in Peru, sitting in front of my shaman Lucho, he said the same thing. I had this raging headache, and I wanted to take Advil or Tylenol before ayahuasca, and I couldn't. And my head hurt so bad that I was like, my vision was flashing out. Like, I was just like getting black spots everywhere. And I'm like, my head's throbbing. I'm sitting in front of this shaman who doesn't even speak English. And I'm like, what do you want right now? And I remember the only thing he said through a translator was, he just looked at me and he's like, tell him that he needs to accept things as they are. He'll always be like this. And this translator girl goes, he wants you to know that you need to accept things as they are. You'll forever be twisted up. And I was like, that was fucking it. Like, that's it. That's all you have to say to me. Someone, you know what I mean? But the more time of my life that goes on, I have it written down in a diary somewhere, the exact words he said. And when I go back and look at it now, I'm like, motherfucker, like he nailed it. Like, it's exactly what you've just said, right? Like, he's saying, those holy people have one foot in this reality and one foot in the other one too, right? So like, your light worker, they see through things. Like, they're totally aware of them, right? Like, and it's hard to explain to people that are like, that shit's not true. And you're like, yeah, maybe. I guess if you've never seen it, you would assume that. You know what I mean? If you saw a magic trick, like, that thing where it's like any advanced technology looks like magic. It just is. If you
Western medicine looked like magic for how many years too?
100%. But like, it's, I think there are some people that do those sorts of practices disservices, but for the ones that really practice it, they are real ones. Like, and it is undescribable. And if you could, if people are the thing is, you have to be brave enough to sit with people like that. Like, that's not like a conversation you can dip out of. But if you're speaking to someone who can see through your bullshit, all you have to answer to is yourself. And almost no one can do that. And I think it's easier to say like, fucking light workers are stupid, man, or like, that's ridiculous, because all those people ultimately are doing is holding a mirror up in front of your face, and everyone wants to try and break it. Nobody's interested in staring at that thing and saying what they see. I think.
I think you're opening up a can of worms here that I'm enjoying. I think it's society. I think it's the society that we live in.
Totally.
We are willing to accept other people's research as fact instead of doing our own.
Mm-hmm. Completely.
And if it doesn't fit our narrative, it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a world where your truth is at your fingertips, whatever you want to believe in.
Yep.
Whether it's A or Z.
Mm-hmm. It is.
And everywhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
And anywhere in between. And it isn't until we accept that people are on their own journey. And like you said earlier with your friend and going to AA, right? That works for some people.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work for everybody.
No, it doesn't. And that's one of the hardest, I think, lessons that I've had, especially recently in my life. In the last 5 years, like since I've been a parent, this has changed me entirely. Like you're aware of how opinionated I am, or how opinionated like I can be if I'm being irritated. And my kids totally changed that for me. Like it stopped me from like thinking in absolutes, because my brain thinks in absolutes, right? So if I met somebody who became sober, because I've been sober, I'd get speaking to them and they'd say like, what do you recommend? And like, I don't recommend anything. I did it by myself. I did it in the most unhealthy way you could possibly do it. I did it on my own, no community, one psychologist, like buried myself in a root cellar for 3 years and came out like, I got there, but I don't recommend it to anybody. You know what I mean? Like, I don't recommend that way. It's ridiculous. I was feeding my addiction and getting over my addiction, if that makes any sense. It was like I had this way of thinking. It was like, you have to think like this. Like my sobriety was patterned around, like you said, like you don't get help, or if you get help, it looks like this. Like, that's how ridiculous my sobriety was. Like, I was going to and I mean, there are worse things than exclusively going to your psychologist, but like, man, it's so stupid when I think back on it now. Had my psychologist died when I was in the middle of sobriety, I'd be living under a bridge right now. Honest to God, man. I had that conversation with her about like sort of early on in my recovery, where it was like, I was going to her, and she sort of became a totem more than anything, right? And I don't think those are bad things, but you need a mixture of all things. You need a personal totem for yourself, a mark on the horizon to walk towards. But you also need people around you that are there. It's just a part of it. Even if you're not talking to them all the time, like, you need something there. And that again, it was like my kids changed my way of thinking in that, because I didn't know how to parent. I didn't have any. I was very fortunate that I got stepkids right off the hop. They're probably not fortunate, because I learned how to parent off of those kids, right? Like, honest to God.
If you had to go, so let me ask you this. Let's turn this conversation around. If you did this all over again, what would you do? What would you do differently, or would you?
Like parenting?
No, during those 3 years of learning what sobriety meant to you.
Oh, I wouldn't have changed anything. No, I'm not a big person that I don't dwell on the past. Like, I'm really thankful for my past. Like, especially if it made me fight for something, I'm great. But like my shaman Wade said, I think it was in the last conversation I had with him, he was speaking about, I can't remember exactly what he said about this, but it was like, you know, when things are down for you, or if you need God, or if you need something, you have to do everything you can to get out of that instance. Like, yes, be grateful to God, but you need to act and push and do all these things. And I think that is one thing that I for sure wouldn't have changed, but I think that was the thing I was most grateful for. I at least, when I had to become sober, had the capacity for hard work. And I don't think it was healthy, but I understood what it was. And I understood that if I worked hard, I could get better. I knew that what was going on in my mind was not right. I knew it wasn't. And I knew there was some kind of work I could do to get better. But it was like, I was just like running in one direction. And the first thing I grabbed was that. And I'm like, I'll just keep running with this. And that's sort of how it went. So
from what I hear, and I could be wrong in assuming this, but I hear you saying you fed the addiction with complete isolation and addiction into one thing to block everything else out, to learn a new way.
100%. But I had to. I like, there was no other path for me personally other than that, because I've had so many things I had to surmount in my sobriety. So like isolation from people was sort of my first step, right? So that was how I did it. So when I became healthy, it was like, okay, sort of isolate yourself. Let's work on the bare essentials. Do you want to die? No. Okay. Are you healthy? Yes. Okay, perfect. You're not drinking, you're not partying, you're not doing anything stupid. Okay, now let's go on to this. And so like, it's unhealthy when I think back on it, but it was the only thing I understood back then, was some sort of management of the situation. I knew I couldn't manage myself, but I understood how to manage what was happening. I understood sort of like the hierarchy of what was wrong. And it was like, there are some dark things that I need to fix, and I need to start with those, but I can't be around these things, or I can't be around that. And it was like, yeah, like I know looking back, it wasn't healthy, but it was sort of the only thing I knew how to play at the time. Right. And I didn't have anyone to discuss with. Like there's no one to strategize with when you're becoming healthy, you're finding it or figuring it out. Right.
When was the moment in your life that you became the top of the pedestal and not someone else?
Oh, 2000 and 2014. 2014. I learned that in its raw form. Like I understood it fundamentally. I wasn't the best at practicing it, but I understood it. But when I met my wife, Lane, I entirely understood it. So, which is why, like, I'm so adoring of my wife too, because my wife was like, she sort of gave me license to pursue that. Like, my marriage, if nothing else, is the most ridiculously supportive thing I've ever been a part of. It was, you know, it allowed me to be as selfish as I could possibly be to fix what else I needed to do. So I would say 2014 was when when it was like, if you're not good, nothing else is going to be. But I think like happily balanced and living that way now can say that, like, I have, not that I have my life under control by any means, but I'm happy. Like my life is so fucking good. I can taste it in my spit. Last 2 years, probably, I think.
I see that.
And I mean, it's amazing because but so much of this is hard work. Like it is seat time. You know what I mean? Like, look at how much seat time have you been putting in with the community of people that you're speaking to, right? Like I find that for myself anyway. It's like, it's no different than a sport for me. It's like, if I'm practicing my swing, I got to get out and keep practicing my swing. And it doesn't matter if you're playing as a single or in a group, you got to practice your swing, and you all got to practice your swing together. But the more you practice that swing, right? Like there's more people that come into your community, and then you're like starting to foster and nurture them. And you know what I mean? Like the more
100%. 100%. And, you know, one of the things I'll share this with you is one of the things that I found is super impactful is when I started this journey of self-acceptance, call it authenticity, call it whatever you will, I had that same, call it addiction to wanting to learn more and just being completely and every spare moment was going into reading or podcasts or, and anything that had to deal with the topic, I was on it, in it, listening while doing the dishes, putting the girls to sleep. But one of the coolest things that I did during that time is I started tracking how many hours I was putting into it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's that tipping point, that 10,000 hours,
there is,
where you become not only proficient, but an expert at it.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have passions in life and things that get us up in the morning and we're excited about. But once you start getting close to that 10,000 hours, once you get, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 hours into it, and it still fires you up the same way as it did from the first day or two,
mm-hmm.
you're on to something.
Yep. Totally. And I definitely, I suppose I'm enamored with God and fixing yourself in that way. Like I'm just like any system of like, I think everyone is, once you become enamored with that, you can feel better. That's a part of the thing of being at rock bottom, and the people that have been to rock bottom, when everything else is up, I really feel like you get more of a perspective of the height of what up could potentially be. Like it changes the perspective of how good this could get, what I could possibly do. And for me anyway, I started really like looking around and listening to friends and anyone I met about what happened in their walk and like what worked for them. And it, like, I'm enamored by it, man. Like it blows my mind that there's this many ways to fix it, because, like when you think about your own walk, you're like, how difficult it was. And you're like, shit, like this took so much to get to here. And then you look to your right and some other person did it with like, whatever, you know what I mean? Some chicken soup for the soul book and a pair of wool socks that their grandma gave them.
And or walk the Camino in Spain, right? Like there's so many different ways to do it. And just being able to be a fly on the wall for those stories is super impactful, because we've all been on our own journey to get where we are,
mm-hmm.
of that self-acceptance, or call it God, or whatever you may call it. And out of the third largest religion on the globe and the second largest religion in Canada is none. They select none.
Really?
Yes.
I did not
whether
know
you call
that.
Whether you call that atheist, or whether you call that whatever you want to call it, but 20% of the Canadian population selected none when it comes to religion. Now, if we look back 100 years, even 50 years, I guarantee you that would not be the number. Maybe globally, because there's different areas around the world that the 10 options or 15 options wouldn't have been there, so they would have selected none in that scenario. But you drive around to small town Canada, and every town, whether it's 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, they've got 5 churches minimum.
Mm-hmm. They sure do.
Minimum. And they were a community spot.
Mm-hmm.
For the community to come to share stories, to share life, to share journeys, to share struggles,
mm-hmm.
and to walk through life together. Now we've got 20% of the world, 20% of Canada that doesn't have a community.
Mm-hmm. I know, it's crazy, man. It blows my mind that's an actual number. But what doesn't surprise me is every single person I ask everybody that I talk to that's a churchgoer. And I have a friend of mine who is a Mormon boy who is like, he is well and truly like, he is one of the pillars in the Mormon community here. Like, and he's He's a beautiful person. But I ask everybody, is it like I sort of like my voice goes all quiet and I'm like, is it God or is it the community? Like level with me here. And he looked at me like straight in the face and his explanation of it being both was crazy. But he's the only person that has been young who has said that to me. Like he's sort of our age. He's sort of like mid to late 30s. And he explained to me about his belief in God and his belief in community, and they gelled for him. And he's not a talk is cheap dude. Like he means that stuff. He's speaking from his heart. But he's the first person that's ever said that to me of our age. And it's usually one way or the other that I've asked just in passing. It's usually hard community or hard, no, this is God. This is what I believe in. But it breaks my heart, but it doesn't surprise me that there's 20% that are like you say, they're losing their community, because that's the community that everyone used to rally around.
This new community that I'm a part of, which is not church, the collective purchased a church, so that we're turning it into a private high school for the arts, with music and all sorts of different stuff. But it's you look on the open market, libraries, churches, all of these community staples that were in so many towns and so many centers are hitting the open market for somebody to do something with, because they're and COVID has probably helped some of that along, for what it's worth. But at the same time, in previous pandemics.
But how do you, so I had this conversation with my mom not long ago, from a marketing perspective on church. So let's just go into this
Get your coffee.
Just 1 second. Just honest to God. I'm just talking from a marketing perspective. How does the church plan to sustain this area of thought? You can't do it, man. You can't tell people that there's a set bunch of rules and everyone's holding a supercomputer in their hand now. You can't expect these people to toe a line. They can find their own methodologies. They can, you can believe in whatever dogma you want, but at the end of the day, there is a methodology that will work for you. There is a methodology that will work for me or whoever else. You can't stop that from happening, regardless. If you can say no all you want, but eventually people are going to be like, well, what do you mean? It looks like there's the sun shining on the other side of the fence too. What do you mean? I can't go over there and look. How do you sustain that as a church in a modern time that here, believe in God, will tell you what to do? Who's paying attention to that? And it's
where did the dinosaur bones come from?
Well, but I mean, and honest to God, when I think about that, it's I hate to pick on the Catholic Church, but I love it. How outlandish is that group of people? I was just talking to somebody about this the other day about these residential schools. The person I was talking to was older and had gone to church their whole life, and they said to me, well, what would you do? And I'm like, why don't we start where your Jesus would have and show up on bended knee at the doorstep and say, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. Let's work it through. Start there. How come you're not starting there? But these institutions are missing those things, right? But it comes back to these institutions are not run by a community of people. Anyone with any sense of decency or self-respect or respect for their fellow man would say, in this scenario, we are wrong. Let's meet this head on. What are we doing here? But these institutions they don't offer support. They don't offer, I know they talk about love and understanding, but it's pretty hard when the captain of your ship isn't doing it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, religion is, I was baptized. I grew up going to Sunday school and all the things, and was part of, teen church groups and all sorts of stuff. And, for me, it was community.
Totally.
And early on, it was the opportunity to sing because I love singing, and I loved going to church because I could sing. And then it was like, well, I got to play with friends, and then all of a sudden it got older, and it was like there's a team group there, and this is kind of cool too. And like everything else in the world, it's different for everybody. Everybody has different experiences, and whether in today's world, whether you choose to get the jab or you don't choose to get the jab, that is ultimately your choice, just like religion is your choice.
Yes. And what blows my mind is that somehow this has crossed over with people into concerning themselves with it being their neighbor's choice. Do you know what I mean? Like they're getting the jab. Like I just saw the best line from a comedian. I can't remember who it was. It was Bill Burr, who it was, but it was basically what he said was like, which should we make legal? Your opinion on people getting vaccinated or your neighbor's opinion on people getting vaccinated? And like, that's, how what's working, right? That's what's happening right now. And it's like the neighbor eat neighbor attitude that's just like alive and well in our society blows my mind, man. Like, I can't believe that, there's
how many people know their neighbors?
Well, yeah, I can't comment on that because we live in the country. So we are, and I suppose I feel more of an attachment to my neighbors because, when you're out in the middle of nowhere, those are your people. Like we're not friends with our neighbors. Like we don't go to their homes and it's not that we're not friends. We're not peers. Like a lot of our neighbors are older than we are, but we'll get along very well. But like those are our people, man. Like something happens, those are our people. Like we can call them, they're coming immediately. That's it. That's how it works. So
80% of the population, though, they won't know their neighbors. Then they may know their immediate, like right beside neighbors, just because you're out in the garden or mowing the lawn and you go hi and you know their first name. That's not knowing your neighbors. That's just being able to understand how to be human and saying hi and be friendly. But so much of it, like it goes back to community. For sure. It goes back to community over and over again.
Absolutely, it does. And so to get back sort of on a little bit of a track we're at there, Nikki. Where can you say where, like what sort of family you grew up in, where you grew up, what sort of family you grew up in, and what sort of relationship you have with your family now, just generalized?
So I grew up in a small town in southern Alberta, a few doors down from yours truly. And I grew up with my mom and dad, and I've got two younger sisters. And I was fortunate enough to have my grandmother and grandfather live down the road from us as well, and also had an aunt and uncle that lived in the same small community. But the greatest, when we were heroes, when we were kids, the best part about growing up in a small town like that, you didn't know until you turned 30 and started having kids of your own. Because as children there, we hated how everybody's parents knew everything about everything that was going on in town. And we as children couldn't stand that. Like as teenagers, it was like you couldn't go outside. You couldn't take a piss on the corner without somebody knowing.
Yep, completely.
Right. And now that I've got kids, that was one of the greatest things that I didn't know that I had. After I left Nanton, my mom and dad split up. It was one of those, that's maybe a conversation for another day, but what I'll say is this is, I think there's so many relationships out there that they stay together for the children, but the kids know this should have been over. This should have been over years ago, but the parents think that they're pulling the wool over the kids' eyes, being like, we're doing this for them. And then afterwards we'll see if we can figure this out. But everybody knows you don't gain your child's respect by doing that. And I didn't know it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
This has been more of a recent thing, that if you aren't willing to put in the time now, it's time to pack it in.
Mm-hmm. So how Nick, does that affect your parenting? Your like not like your philosophy of parenting, your boots on the ground day-to-day parenting. When you grew up in a home, like you said, where you knew that it was off, they didn't obviously like each other very much if they get divorced and they're staying together for kids. So how does that affect your everyday when you're parenting? Like, do you think about them? Do you think about those instances and you're like, don't do that, don't be like that?
100%.
Yeah.
There are absolute moments where, um, and for me, my father had, he was an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's moments in all of our lives, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's relationships, that you wake up one day and go, holy shit, when did I become my dad?
Mm-hmm.
Or when did I become my mother? And it's like, you grow up so much of your life thinking or trying not to be them, that one day you wake up and you go, holy shit, I'm exactly like them.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the hardest part about parenting was I wanted to be the opposite of what my father was for me. For me, my dad was gone 6 days of the week, missed out on a lot of our lives, was there for big moments and made things happen, to be there for special moments. But at the same time, he was gone for a lot of it. And what that has brought on to me is I have the biggest case of FOMO imaginable, of fear of missing out on any moment with my family.
Mm-hmm.
If my wife goes to the beach, I'm like, I can be there in 2.5 hours because I've got this and that and another thing to do. And then I could be there for an hour and a half, and then I can come, and then I got to go do something else. And it's just this constant fear of missing out, because I didn't have that growing up.
That's so sorry. That's so crazy you say that, because I have that entirely and I've never thought about that before. Because every time, because my wife and I have like a ruthlessly diligent work schedule. Like our whole wall is a whiteboard and it's like, you're doing this, I'm doing this, you're doing this. But when one's working, the other one has kids. But if my wife has the kids and is going to the creek or going for a hike or going to do this or going to do that, like I will find a way, man. Like I will stay up till 3 a.m. working. And like, but I've never heard that fear of missing out. Cause like yeah, like exactly what you're saying. Like look at my watch, like I'll be there in an hour and 23 minutes. Like yeah, man, I get it. That's crazy. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. So and yeah, for me, like my mom was always there. Every time there was sports, my mom was a stay-at-home mom and was there after school, and like she was the rock in our family. She wasn't there available from an emotional standpoint, which was part of part of what's a lot going on currently, and part of my journey over the last few years is because I didn't see what a normal relationship was growing up. I saw it from other people's parents, but with that, you walk into you see everything with goggles on. You only see what they want you to see, right? So for me, like my biggest rock in my life was my grandmother and my grandfather, who my mom, for the most part, despised because of how she grew up. Mm-hmm. So it was this constant confliction between what I desired from a parent and what I was getting, and which brings a whole new ball of wax to how I parent. So
when you parent, do you well, maybe I'll just give you an example of my experience, because I'm not sure how I could word this, but like throughout my day, I constantly think of how I grew up, honest to God, and I'm like, if I have to discipline, if I have to think about the way I need to react to something, like I try and think about like what's the most appropriate way that I could handle this for my children. And it's a thing that I've really had to learn, because my compulsive or impulsive tendencies when I'm irritated with my kids or when I discipline or when I want to get something done. I mean, those are obviously things you've learned, right? Like I'm just expressing the things that I was taught by my parents, that their parents taught them. And I find myself spending a lot of time actively thinking, like, is this an appropriate thing to do? And I suppose my question is, do you spend a ridiculous amount of time as well also saying to yourself, like, is this an appropriate thing to do? Or do you check in with yourself when the day is done? Or do you check in with yourself after, like, maybe you've done something with your girls, or like one of them had to get in trouble for something, and once the dust is settled on that and you walk away, you're like, shit, I should have done that one differently? Or are you like, yes, I did it right that time? Do you have those moments?
I'm 100% the analyzer. They're like any parent, shit gets out of hand because it's life, right? There's different dynamics at play all the time. And I think one of the things that I wish that I could release, and I'm still working on, is, when we were kids, and maybe not you specifically, but for me, children were to be seen and not heard.
Really?
And I still have that mentality with my children, even though I know that isn't what I want. There are moments throughout the day when I'm trying to get shit done, whether it's make lunch or get things ready, or we're going somewhere, or I see my wife preparing those things. And you're just, it's like, why can't you just do something other than be here with us while we're trying to complete this? And I think it's those moments of weakness, we'll call it, where we want to be better, but we're not there yet. But I'm comfortable in the now, and I realize that if I don't understand what's happening now, I'm going to miss out on what could happen. So I'm not thinking in my head, how should I handle this? I react, because it's, as the old saying goes, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for acceptance for permission. For permission in the first place, right? So, and what I've, the biggest lesson that I've learned as a parent is to accept that I do not have all the answers. There was a moment about a year, like about 3 months after the pandemic started, and there was this time of, where are the kids going to school? Were they not going to school? Can we go see family? Can we go see parents? Can we, like, there was this mass chaos that nobody knew what was happening. And I can remember sitting on the floor in my oldest daughter's room, and her having a meltdown after meltdown, and having one of those days where she was beating up on her younger sister, yelling at mom and dad, those moments that all kids have. And then I brought her to a room and then was like, you know what? When dad was little, I used to do the same thing. And you know what's crazy is that when I became a father, I didn't get a book on how to help little girls or little boys, how to work through these scenarios, because this pandemic, COVID, has never happened for dad either. And she was like, what do you mean this has never happened for you? And I was just like, I am sorting this out just as much as you are, and I'm going to make mistakes as being your father. And all I can say is that I will ask for forgiveness if I mess up, but I'm going to try different ways to make your life as great as it can be. And I think that's one of the things growing up in our area, the millennial area, if you will, because I hate being called a millennial, but it is what it is, that our parents, to my knowledge, never acknowledged that they were wrong.
No, they didn't. But I think that was the plight of that whole generation, It was like, rather than, it's the goofiest shit. Because rather than say, like, there's nothing you can say to them either. But this is sort of where it gets muddy for me, is when you speak to them about things that have gone wrong, the default answer is always like, and things went right. And you're like, no, I know that things went right. I was there. I get it. I'm talking about what went wrong. Like, let's talk about this one thing. But it's this, they have this weird culture of looping around it, right? And it ultimately comes down to not being able to stand in front of it. That's it. Like, it has nothing to do with like the apology, yeah, or acknowledgement. That is one thing, but there's, honest to God, in my opinion, like that generation and the ones that I've had to deal with, there's like 10 steps that need to happen before they even acknowledge what they were doing as parents. Cause it's like, well, when you know what it's like, you know how hard some of those conversations are to have, but like, imagine when the tables are turned and I'm speaking about these instances, I couldn't imagine my kids coming to me and saying like, Matt, you screwed this up. Like, I have 2 stepkids who are going to come to me and say that. They call me Matt. I speak to them like they're adults. They're very intelligent. You know what I mean? They're going to be like, Matt, I screwed this up. And I could not imagine saying, no, I didn't. You know what I mean? The only answer in that situation is if your kids are like, you screwed this up, is like, well, what happened? Well, this happened. Okay, well, what else could have happened? But it was like their default was like our parents' generation was like, well, I think this got screwed up. No, it didn't. Went just fine. You're like,
You turned out all right. Turned out all right.
Oh, it's so...
You know, it's funny when I'll share this. When you are able to share that vulnerability and accept that you are wrong, what it fosters in children is they are able to pinpoint and call out their friends for stepping out of line. And not stepping out of line because they're being bad, but I can remember about 3 months ago, I was walking along with my 2 oldest daughters who are 7 and 5, and there was a little girl that came up to my 5-year-old and said, "Hi, my name is so-and-so." And she didn't say anything back to her, just kept walking.
Yep.
And my eldest was like, "Hi," and just kind of like made up for the fact that she didn't say anything. And I didn't say anything. It was just, we kept walking. And all of a sudden my eldest turned to my 5-year-old and was like, "McKenna, you didn't, that girl asked you a question and you didn't say anything to her. And that's not okay. You have to say, when someone says hello to you, you say hello back." And she goes, "You're right." And as the father, I was just standing there going, that was like one of the most proud moments because I didn't need to say anything. It came from her big sister. And it was that conversation between big sister and little sister that calling her out on something and go, "You don't do that." But that comes from vulnerability of sharing as parents and preaching what we believe in and those beliefs, right? So
totally, it's
so important.
And I just had one of these moments yesterday with my stepson, who's the oldest. So he's 13. He's 13 years old. And so my life situation is unbelievable. I have 2 stepkids who are young teenagers and 2 little boys who are 3 and not even 2. So like my kids are being raised, for better or worse, 4 adults in the house, of which 3 are more responsible than I am. Like, my life is amazing. Like, I have this between my stepkids and my wife, it's unbelievable. But I couldn't imagine having said this in my house. So my stepson leaves the table the other night, and one of the little boys he's screaming and he's doing whatever. And I swore, or something happened that I said something I wasn't supposed to. I can't remember if I swore or I said something that was wrong. But from the other room, my stepson, in the most patronizing voice he could possibly muster, goes, there's this gap between our living room and our kitchen table. And he goes, "Matt, you have to be aware of your surroundings when you're sitting in front of those kids." And it's like, it was just me parroting what I would say to him, right? Like, if he was to do something stupid. But I said to my wife that night, I was like, I was so thrilled. Like, that was not the house I grew up in. At 13 years old, I was not yelling over the thing, like patronizingly to my parents, that they need to clean it up. because you guys say that shit to us constantly. So it's your turn, dummy. And I was just like, you know, when he said that, I was like, yeah, you're right. And I'm going to smash you now because you said that to me. But, you know, like it was this amazing thing to me because I've been thinking about him so much during the summer because he's 13, he's going into grade 8. I remember that age. And I remember how I felt and the things that were going on in my household at the time. And I'm like, it's so strange, his life in contrast to mine in relationship to parents and what parents are doing and what we allow and what we ask them to speak about and what they do speak about and what's acceptable to them. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it goes right back to what you said. We were raised of like children are meant to be seen, not heard. So you're never heard. You just leave. Like you'll leave and go find someone that will hear you in those moments where like if you give children the opportunity to speak within your home, within your life, like your daughter did with your other daughter, they're going to speak. They're going to start speaking those truths that they should be doing.
Yeah, and if you can foster that before they really start grade school,
Totally,
man. Like I think of where I was at 7 years old compared to where she's at 7 years old, and like parenting is tough fucking work.
Yeah.
And for those out there that think that, yeah, like, you know, it's not, you're not doing it right.
For sure. But it should be the toughest thing you do. Like parenting should be the hardest thing you possibly do. It's the only thing you need to get right. And it's the only thing you get one shot at. So if you're not working your ass off of being a parent, you're fucking it up. That's it. Like, that's it. You should be cross-examining the things that are happening with your kids, with your relationship with your kids, how they're functioning every single day. Like, that's it. Your only job as a parent is to be able to catapult them into the stratosphere, and they're gone. They take off way past whatever you did. And in doing that, like, your life is bound to be uncomfortable. You have to rip apart your shit so your kids don't have to walk through that. And when your children are trying to fix their own problems, they're trying to fix their own issues within them, it's just a part of the culture that they grew up in. Like, that's the one thing with my younger ones will understand it better than my stepkids. My stepkids are great at it too, though, where they go to psychologists. Like they've been going to psychologists. Like, it's a normal thing for them to reconcile what's going on in their mind with a psychologist, if nothing else with a psychologist. I couldn't imagine if I had that opportunity growing up to have worked out what was going on in the old noodle with a professional, you know?
No. What else? Yeah. I mean, I played competitive sports growing up and was around some very successful people that have gone on to play in the big leagues. And I think about, you know, I don't dwell on the past because my life has turned out pretty fucking good. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I look back on the differences that changed those journeys from where they went down to the path that I chose to go down. And a lot of it goes down to the 6 inches between your ears.
Yeah, man.
Those families that had the opportunity and gave their children the opportunity to understand their mental health were successful. And the parents that didn't know what that meant couldn't provide that.
No, completely. Which I suppose stands to reason, right? You can't teach what you don't know. So then you just default back to what you do know, which is more of a mess that someone has to wade through later. And that's sort of the crazy thing to me as a parent, as a step parent, is the what's the word? I don't know. I suppose the knowing or the understanding of where you came from to know where you're going, so you don't muddy that up anymore. Like, there's a lot of work that I do in my life about, like, what do I need these boys and girls to do? What are they doing? What are they not doing? How do I make sure? And I don't when I say things like that, people always think like I'm trying to control my kids. I don't care what my kids do. I don't care what they're like, I don't care what they do for sports. I don't care what they enjoy to do personally. Like, I'm just thinking about like how to support them individually as people. And that's been another hard lesson for me, man. I got 4 kids with 4 of the most distinct personalities I could possibly imagine. I'm sure that one of them is going to go to jail one day, and I'm sure that one of them is going to be a priest one day. And trying to jockey those personalities is insane to me, because I think a part of being a parent and being an effective parent is you have to provide that child with their own first class experience of being a child. Like, you have to support them to the best of your ability, whatever that is, regardless of my personal likes. And that was a hard one, was like, I have my own personal likes as a man, as a father, but all of my kids don't like the same things I do. And I'm having to immerse myself entirely into things that I'm like, I don't like doing this, but I love doing this now. Like, how much do you want to do it? Here we are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're all so infinitely unique that, with this personality assessment that I work with, if everybody on the globe was to take the assessment, so there's roughly 7.7 billion people on the planet. And at this stage, I think 25 million have taken the assessment. But if the whole planet was to take the assessment, there's 34 strengths that are on this, that you get 1 through 34. The chances of you sharing your top 5 strengths with the rest of the globe in different order, so mixed up the order, the chances of you sharing those top 5 with other people is about you and 223,000 other people across the globe. Not the same specific order, in different order, but of the 34 strengths, there's 223,000 people out of the 7.7 billion. You break that down into the exact same top 5, and it breaks it down. You get down to 250.
Is that right?
Yes.
Really?
So you and 250 other people in a room sharing this, just the top 5 of the 34 strengths. You go to top 6, and it's 1 in 8. Really? You go to top 7, and you are the only person on this planet, statistically and analytically speaking, from this assessment, that will have the same top 7 strengths on the globe.
No kidding.
By the year 2050, they predict that there will be 135 billion people that have ever lived, been born onto this planet. And those are about the odds of sharing 1 through 34.
Really?
Of this strengths assessment. So when, that old adage of, you're unique, you're special. Well, technically, there is nobody that has ever been born, ever has been born, or ever will be born that has your unique set of talents. It's now trying and teaching and helping people learn how to use those talents to show up in the world authentically. Because like you said, your one son may be a priest and the other one is going to go to jail. And maybe not go to jail.
No,
but
for sure.
It's those people, the most successful people they're not trying to be someone else. They've got people to do those things that they're not good at. Your zone of genius is what makes you successful. And that moment that you stop trying to be someone else and you just live authentically within who you are and what makes you great. And I'm not saying don't do the fucking dishes because you're not good at the dishes.
Completely. No, I totally understand what you're saying.
It's understanding how you work, whether you're empathetic, whether you like to get up in front of a crowd and talk to people, whether you like to be a fly on the wall and just kind of sit back and watch. Like, we have all these different unique talents. And that is completely what changed my mental health, is when I realized what my talents were. I innately probably knew them, but it wasn't until that I took this assessment where it was in front of my face and got some coaching to go along with it, where I was like, holy fuck, why didn't I do this 15 years ago.
Completely. So what are you plugging that data set into once you get it? Like once you are doing, like, in what, I suppose maybe give some more context to that assessment. Like, what are you doing, and then what are you doing with it?
So what am I doing with it is basically, so the company that does this is the Gallup company. So you've probably all heard of what Gallup is. During election time down in the States, they're the one that run the Gallup polls of who's going to win the election and that sort of stuff. It's a huge research company out of the University of Nebraska. And they created this assessment back in, I think it was back in 1956 as it's kind of the original starting point with Donald Clifton. And it was the idea of just what I said earlier of, why do we try, like, put it this way. If your child gets a report card and there's 3 A's, a B plus, and a D minus, as a parent, or maybe as your parents, what's the first thing that your parents would say about your report card?
Like the way that I grew up, or the way that I parent?
The way that you grew up.
Oh, the way that I grew up. Like it's only the bad ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like this needs to be higher. That's it.
Why didn't you do, why was this a D minus? Why, tell me why. We need to get that better. So the way strengths work, and what I love about it is the fact that imagine, so you've got a 5-point star, right? There's 5 points on the star, the farthest out. Imagine those as being your strengths in life. Okay. And we all know, like I was telling my kids the other day, I used to be able to ride my bike without my hands, like no hands riding your bike. Like we all did it as kids. But if I was to do that now, I'd ass over T-Kel so fast, there's no fucking way I'd be able to do that. So those are strengths. And if you don't work on your strengths, they diminish, right? They naturally get weaker and weaker. And those weaknesses in our life, or our bottom 5 strengths, when we try to be something that we are not, we basically taking those low points in the star and bringing them out, and the high points are coming in. So what you end up getting is this weird, funky looking circle, which to me sounds like mediocrity. And I don't know about you, but I have never woken up for a day of my life and go, I'm going to go out and be fucking mediocre today.
I'm striving for mediocrity and I'm fucking near there.
I'm almost there.
Yeah, just about.
So what the assessment does is it allows those trained to do this is to understand the dynamic of what 1 is and what 5 is, and how to manage and how to use all of these strengths, coerce it to a point where they blend in together, so that it gives you the tools to how to handle day-to-day situations, so that you handle them in your zone of genius rather than trying to do it in a way that you've been taught how somebody else did it.
That's very interesting. I've done I don't know if it's that assessment, but I've done one of these assessments that you're speaking about, where it spits out your strengths and it takes you hours to fill it out. And I don't know if it was this, but it was like 7 years ago already.
I've done so many, like I've done Myers-Briggs, I've done the color test, I've done Enneagram, I've done, like, in a previous sales role, that like a sales manager role, like we did this stuff all the time. And what you're either a number 1 in an Enneagram and you're bunched together with 7 million other people on the globe. And to me, that's like, you're just telling me what a group of people are like. And yes, that is me, but that doesn't tell me anything about my unique and why I do what I do. Where this assessment is like, you are the only person that has this. Yes, we share some of these top strengths together, but no one will ever have the same
combination
order as you do. And it's how you use those strengths in combination with each other and release the other ones. Because, what I've learned in this is life is linear. You know, we set a goal and you move forward, you move forward, you move forward. And then you're like, oh, I need a vacation. And you take 2 weeks off, and we've all done this. And then you come back and you're like, I hate taking vacation because now I've got all this work to do. I shouldn't have gone to begin with.
I'm doing that next week.
There you go. That's what I'm doing this week. But at the same time, what ends up happening is you didn't take time away. You've got to catch up while doing all the same work at the same time. So now you got to play catch up, which means you've actually not progressed. You've digressed in that linear fashion towards your goal. And the other thing that we end up doing is when we're told, or when we think that we're too much for people, we go, oh, that goal is too much. I can't do that. So it's learning. And what we end up doing is turning into something that somebody told us once, that, like, for me, when I am being too much for people, I need to plan out my schedule. Everything's got to be routine. And that's called discipline for those keeping track at home. And discipline is my 34th strength. So for me, as soon as I start writing in a calendar and like, this is what we need to do and plan and routine, that is a Jess thing, my wife, because that is what she is good at. That is within her realm of strengths. And I let her do that because for me, I could spend 3 days making out a routine and it would be a complete fucking waste of my time and everybody else's, because she could do that in 10 minutes and it would take me 3 days to do it.
That's actually the thing I'm most thankful for in my life, to be honest with you, is my wife and I innately understand each other's roles to a decimal point. And we don't we'll push each other's comfort zones for anything. Like, we're not interested in the other one not being we're constantly pushing each other to be uncomfortable always. But it's amazing when you live with your partner and you get a whole mess of shit and you're like, oh man, well, here you go, honey. And they do the same thing, but it's all problems that you chew apart, where it's not something that they're chewing apart. It's a thing that you can, like you're saying, you can take it entirely and you're like, oh yeah, this is nothing. But they hand it to you with this look on their face like, I don't want this. And here, you take this. And
it fills your cup by doing it because it's in your zone of genius. Like for me, if you gave me a problem and was like, I can't come up with a solution for it, it would take me about 5 minutes and I'd be like, this is what you need to do. And for my wife, that's my number one strength and her number 34th. So thinking outside of the box for her is she needs structure. She needs what is the actual plan? Tell me what to do and I'll execute it. Doing that sort of stuff for her is you may as well be talking French because she doesn't understand what you're talking about.
Completely. So are you doing this professionally, Nick, or what are you doing with this coaching system and this information into this coaching system? Are you doing this? Are you participating in this?
I am a certified coach when it comes to the Gallup strengths. I am also a certified coach when it comes to another assessment that is from the people that created this Gallup assessment that is more geared towards families, and it's called Incredible Family. And it has more to do with parents and the child, and children as young as 4 years old the parents do the assessment for the child. But the cool thing is it really helps you individualize your parenting style to what the child needs. For example, my 5-year-old is a performer. And my eldest is a competitor. So she's always comparing, even though she's not huge into sports, she's always comparing herself to other people, whether it's artwork or whether it's baking something or whether it's herself. And, I used to be able to do this and now I can do it better. It's understanding how to push them so that they enjoy being pushed to become a better version of themselves instead of just pushing them because that's how we were raised or that's how I feel like we should do this. Each child is different. Like you explained with your children. Each child is infinitely different.
Yep.
And when you realize as a parent that I need to either parent from my heart or parent from my head, because those are two different things. If you process before parenting, those are head strengths. And if you're like, this feels like we should do this, like that's your zone of genius. Stay within the heart or stay within the head when you're parenting. So
is this methodology you're speaking about? So this data and this methodology, is this what brought you? Is this what not cultivated, but is this on this platform of people and this way of thinking? Is this what is that the group you were speaking about that allowed you the opportunity to have that God experience that you were talking about? Like it was through what you're speaking about now. So it was a group of like-minded people within this methodology you're speaking about.
Yes.
Do all the people that you talk with in this, or that sort of lead or guide your way in this methodology, have they all had the same sort of experiences? Like, do they also sort of carry the same thought that the community is the most important thing? Like, once you understand yourself entirely, community is the best way to grow yourself thereafter.
The short answer, no. From the results that I have seen for working with clients, everybody uses this differently. Some of it's for personal development in becoming a better version of themselves. Some of it is simply because they're, whether like myself and going through some mental health issues. I'm not a licensed mental health practitioner, but at the same time, my experiences were for me, and I share my story, and I can and have seen help in people. But again, the difference between a mentor and a coach is very simple. A mentor has done what you have done and tells you how to do it. A coach, on the other hand, is somebody that has never done what you have done and doesn't tell you how to do it. They ask questions, and then they help you realize the steps that you need to take in order to go through your own journey.
Yep. That's an excellent way to break that down. I've never thought about that before, but that would be the difference between the two, wouldn't it? A mentor and a coach.
So coaching for me isn't about telling people what to do. It's about asking good questions, and this assessment helps me understand innately who these people are and who this person is.
I understand.
And asking questions based upon how this assessment lines up with how things match and compare, and asking questions, how does this work? And then naturally what ends up happening is life happens, and you tell me, they tell stories and they tell scenarios, and they're like, help me understand what this means. And I'm like, well, you've talked about 3 or 4 different strengths and how you handled it, and tell me about what it would look like if you use this instead. And they end up processing how to handle it the next time without ever me saying anything about how to do it themselves. And naturally what ends up happening is they look at this and go, I can manage, maybe not handle it completely, but I can manage more of my own bag of shit because I understand how I need to do it, rather than the way that everybody thinks that it should be done in a broad stroke, right? So
that's so interesting, because it would, like, I understand the value in that immediately of, even if you had direction or if I suppose I'm thinking from my own perspective, if I had direction when I got started with sobriety and figuring it out, holy Jesus, it would have been beneficial to have any amount of direction as to who I was or what I should have been doing based on what, like you're saying, like what my strengths are, right? Because I mean, that so much time is wasted just marching in a direction that like you're sure that this is what you're supposed to do, so you just keep doing it, and either you bonk into a wall and that's not the way you were going, or you know what I mean, you just keep sort of direction.
And you know, I've known you for a long time, and I know that you went through those struggles, and I can guarantee you your balance in life would have come through creativity. And if there was moments where you were not creative and not building and not putting things together and, you know, thinking outside of the box, those would have been tough days for you.
Oh, it for sure. And it still is. Like I have such an artistic thirst. Like I mean, I get to use it professionally all the time. So it's amazing, but you're very right. Like the times that have been sort of the blackest are the ones that are like, you know, you just feel stagnated. Like you say, like if you're not able to express your own genius or what, not that I'm a genius, if you're able to express the things in yourself that are most wanting expression, like motherfucker, you are just spinning your tires. It's the worst. I don't miss those days, Nick. I don't have them anymore, but I don't miss them.
Don't miss them. No,
not at all. So do you're currently seeing, like you're currently taking and seeing clients?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how would people get a hold of you for this?
The best way to get a hold of me is via my website. Website is strengths.report instead of strengths.com, because I read people's strengths report. So it's strengths.report, and there's the opportunity to not only understand a little bit about the Gallup assessment and the opportunity to purchase directly through Gallup, or there's also the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the incredible family assessment from a parenting standpoint as well. So they're both there right on the website. The opportunity to book a 30-minute free assessment that's in there as well once you've taken those assessments. Just a consultation as well. And then outside of that, there's kind of specialized one-on-one and group coaching that I also offer as well for corporate and for business clients and individuals and families as well. So
that's wicked, man. Good for you. It's not all people get a chance to find themselves and then able to help other people find themselves as well. It's usually not a segue. It's usually, you know, you find your thing, and people generally, I find, stick to themselves once they've figured it out. Like they're sort of like myself, I guess. Like I don't actively pursue helping people the way that you do. And I feel guilty about it all the time. And I know that I shouldn't be, you know what I mean? Like I do help, like I help people whenever I can, but I always feel like I know that it's not my calling to be doing the things that you're doing. But when I hear people like you talk about those things, I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm lacking in something. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like I should be doing more face to face, but
there's no way I could run a podcast.
Yeah, well,
it's not my DNA. There's no way for me, like recording myself and editing is like so outside of my realm of understanding that it's just like, so we all have our own things that we can share stories and share our journeys and have those conversations that they're meaningful for different people, you know? So what if you don't turn it into a coaching business? This is helping people more than you and I will probably ever know.
Well, I hope so. I enjoy speaking about these things, and I really just want people to, I think, consider the divine more than they do, or consider the path to it more than they do, because it's so unique. It's such an interesting perspective to me, right? Like I didn't, and I even go into these conversations with like, I try not to do it, but I can't not at this point. I hate double negatives, but I can't, like, I'll think about speaking to you and I'll be like, I'll try and guess what it is that brought you. Cause it's always with somebody. It's something. It's like, like you said about community, like community, it's more than that, but community is the platform that you were like, standing on the platform of community took you to that place. But everyone's platform that they stand on is so different. And it's so interesting to me because it's never what I thought it would be, ever. You know what I mean? I would have never guessed in a million years that you would have said that this community that I found got me to that place and I'm good. Like it blows my mind that and I'm so thrilled for it, that there are so many ways for people to find these experiences and these God moments and these realities in themselves. I just hope that they, that's one thing I hope for people. I hope that they're able to pursue those moments themselves, whether it is whatever it is, whether it is in a church or whether it's camping or whether it's doing psychedelics or whether it's whatever your poison is. I don't care. I just want you to be happy, you to be healthy, you to be safe, and figure out what you were supposed to do in this thing. Because it sucks when you don't have that information,
It's willing to try and fail.
Mm-hmm.
And that journey of realizing that there is more out there for me. And put it this way, I'll say this, Tony Robbins, there's the 5, he's got his many things that he talks about, but he talks about I think it's the love language, or not love languages, but the basic needs.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's 2 of them that I will. One of them is security, and the other one is insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
And as children, we live in insecurity all the time. We need it because that's where the questioning, that's where we're like the world of wonder is all about childhood. And you wonder where you fit into the world, and you try this and you attempt that. And am I good at this? And maybe I'm not so good at that. And then all of a sudden we get to adolescence and it's pounded into us. You need to go to university. You need to go to school. You need to get a job. When are you going to start a family? When are you going to get married? And it's that security in our life is pounded into us.
Yep.
And we lose that sense of wonder. And oftentimes as a parent, and maybe I'll leave it at this, our children are in this constant sense of needing that sense of wonder. And as a parent, we feel like we are required to provide security for something that doesn't want security.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where children and parents battle and hit heads so often, mm-hmm. is because one wants security and the other one is thriving for insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
And once we realize as parents that we need to feed that, because that sense of wonder is what develops brilliant, remarkable children and brilliant and remarkable human beings for the next generation.
Ooh. Oh, Nicholas, that was a big thought. That was a good one. Is there anything else, Nick, that you have in closing of this conversation? Is there anything else that you would like to speak about, or that we didn't touch base on this one? Anything like that?
Not for today. I think we've been going on for a good hour and a half, maybe 2 at this point. And I feel like we've just demolished the cherry on top of an ice cream sundae.
Oh, totally. We'll do this again soon. There's a bunch of different directions I have written down here that I'd like to do. But so I suppose in closing, Nick, what is one thing that you would say to your younger self to get you here? Like if you could go back in time and give that little fella some advice, or tell him that it was going to be all good, like what piece of advice would you give him for this journey to being him standing here now?
It's okay to ask for help.
There's a lot of people lacking in that one, isn't there?
We're so, Lewis Howes is talked about this in his book, The Mask of Masculinity. Boys in general have been told to hide everything. Like anytime that there's a sense of weakness, whether it's inside of a locker room, whether it's inside of a family setting, but man up, stop being a pussy. And all that does is bury those emotions and those feelings deeper and deeper and deeper. And whether it's sexual orientation, whether it's, things that are going on in the family home, there was the hockey player that just recently came out as gay. And, when you play in a hockey team, you don't walk into the change room and go, my name's Nick and I've got a girlfriend.
Yeah.
So why should it be a gay person's responsibility to walk into the room and say, my name's John and I'm gay and I like boys?
100%. And we can't start talking about this because I will be here for 3 hours. But I will say this of anyone who's living whatever lifestyle they choose, it blows my mind that anyone would still concern themselves with someone else's life and have an opinion as to how they're living. That blows my mind. Like about the gay kid that came out he played the WHL this year and this was his draft year. Is that how that worked?
He was drafted last year, I believe, by Detroit or Chicago or something. It doesn't matter, but when he is already, yeah.
But when I see that he's gay, I'm like, honest to God, I get flooded with this rush of emotion. That's like, who gives a fuck? Like, he's here to play. Like, what does it matter? I don't care who he's dating. I don't care how many people he's dating. Can you play? Obviously you can. What are we talking about here? Like, why is this even a thing? And I'm so grateful that culture is changing. And you know what? Another one that was insane about that culture of hockey that is completely changing. I can't recall the kid's name who got he removed himself from the draft this year because no one was going to take him. But that American kid,
Ottawa,
Ottawa
ended up taking him.
But I'm not sure on the story entirely, but it was very much a hockey playing story. Like this kid's playing in Sweden or Switzerland, has a sexual encounter with a girl, takes a bunch of pictures, sends all these pictures to his buddies, which in any other time would just be a laugh for a bunch of animals, is now a time that's actually hindering your ability to be drafted or whether or not you're a liability to a team. Like that's so crazy that it's come this far. Like not too long ago, that would have been laughed about in a locker room, or that would have been, it would just been a big joke. Like, look at how funny I am, right? And to read that this kid has just come out and he's come out, and to read that this kid that destroyed this poor girl's life for a small moment of time is actually like seeing repercussion within the community that he is playing this game in. It's crazy because that's not the game that we grew up in, right? It's not the culture that we grew up in. It would have been handled totally differently, right?
And to go back to the final thought, and when bringing up, covering up, burying emotions and burying those deep feelings as boys and as girls for that matter, we oftentimes forget how simple going to someone else and just saying, I'm having troubles. I'm having trouble with such and such. And I came to you because I trust you. I like you. And if you don't have the answer, can you point me in the right direction? And I think if I knew that at 14 or 15 years old, I may have made the same decisions that I have made, but I also would have known a lot more great people in my life and had a deeper connection with those people because of that simple question.
Yeah, that's a profound thing to offer. That would, the more information you could have had back then, it might not have changed, like you say, it might not have changed who you are fundamentally, but it would have changed your connections with people and your relationships, and you would have known yourself in a greater way and been more at ease with what was going on. But cool. That was a good one, Nick. That was I enjoyed that one. That was a wonderful conversation. So maybe one last time, Nick, just say where people can get a hold of you on your social media, your whatever points of contact you have for people to go and look at what you're doing with your platform.
The easiest way to get a hold of me and to find me is through my website. My all my social media and everything is already connected with that. My phone number and all my contact information. Again, the website is the simple www.strengths.report. And yes, you are writing that down correctly because it's not a .com or .ca, so it's unique.
That's awesome.
Like we all are. So
that's exactly right. I'm super interested about this now. I'm gonna go check out your website because that all these excellence things interest me, Nick. That's what I run towards. I am the moth, and that is the light on the porch for me. If there is more truth and more understanding in something, I am just eating it all up, man. Just bonking into the light all night long. But yeah, but thank you for doing this, Nick. Thank you for having this conversation with me. We will we'll do this again soon. We'll do another one of these here in the next month, and there's a whole bunch of things, I think, different routes we can go down with what we covered here today. So again, thank you.
Tip of the iceberg.
That's exactly right. So thank you, Nikki. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to that as much as I did. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Nick. See you guys later.
Peace out.